Welcome Wargamers. In this video we're going to talk about how to paint a cool gradient going from a warm red up to a cool blue. How we're going to do this is I'm going to show you exactly step by step how to do this on an actual primed model. We're going to go, like I said, in depth about how to get that transition in there. I'm going to kind of route the video talking about some really helpful tips that no matter what colors you're using can make really strong transitions. Okay, so if you haven't seen it online, this is my herdstone for the Beasts of Chaos in Age of Sigmar. And when I posted the picture of it, several people asked me how I did the color transition to go from the warm red stone here. It looks kind of twisty and warpy. There's some elements of purples and reds and orange and that, and how it transitions into the cooler gray colors, which they're gray and bluish, up towards the top. And how do I make that happen? Well, the answer is simply it's just dry brushing. It's really not a fancy process. I'll go through my paints that I use here. We're going to start off by doing the entire model, dry brushing it from black in Dawnstone. And then we're going to go kind of from the top to kind of like the midsection-ish with Fenrisian Gray, which is a very, it's like a light powdery blue type thing. We're going to be very light on that. And then we're going to build up from the bottom with the red color, starting with Corn Red, Evil Sun Scarlet, and then ending with Kindle Flame, which is a dry paint that people don't use a whole lot. And our test model today is going to be the Gnashing Maw's Endless Spell from Age of Sigmar. I just never had a reason to paint this guy, and I think it would be pretty stinking cool to do so. So we're going to do that exact same process. We're going to have the red be towards the front and kind of end off in a cool blue. I think it'll look very chaosy and warpy. I absolutely am pumped about it. So let's go ahead and begin. Starting with Dawnstone, we are, like I said, just going to give it a really heavy dry brush on pretty much the entire surface area, front and back. The idea being here is we're going to lay the foundation of the gray. So if you're doing stone like I was with the herdstone, you lay the foundation of what the item actually is, and then you're going to build up some cool color transitions from there. So we're going to have this guy be kind of base grayish, and we'll come back here when this is all done. Okay, so we are now back here looking at the model after it's been completely dry brushed with Dawnstone. You can see all those nice flame edges and that are really popping out now for you on the camera. And so what we're going to do now that we have our base color of the entire area done and a little bit highlighted, we're going to start with the Fenrisian Gray. And for that one, we're going to try and limit it to about a third of the model. So starting back here on these big flame tips and coming about a third of the way. So we're going to try and cut it off right about there-ish. A little bit further back around there. And it's going to be a much lighter dry brush. You'll see this section becoming very blue. So let me jump into that. Okay, and as you can see, we pushed the blue back up to this area. And you have noticed I did come a little bit further forward in very specific spots. We'll talk in the end of the video about why I did that. It's very important, but now we're going to start diving into the reds, which is certainly the most important part, visually the most intriguing. So we're going to start off with Corn Red, and when you apply it to this kind of black, slightly highlighted base, what it's going to be doing is almost taking on more of those kind of almost slightly purple hues that you'll see. And that one we're going to push pretty far. We're going to go from the nose, we're going to kind of mix it into where the Fenrisian Gray is, so push it all the way forward till about the 2/3 or halfway mark, right about there. So the Corn Red is now done, and you can see we did the same thing as we did before, where we brought it to the center line here, and in some parts I pushed a little bit further back. Again, we're going to cover why towards the end of this video. But next layer we're going to do here is Evil Sun's Scarlet. Now here's the important thing about making this work. Whenever you do a highlighting layer, say our Corn Red ended right there, right? You want your next layer to be half of what that one was. So let's say here. Okay, we're going to come to it's pretty much the back row of the teeth. That's pretty much where it's going to dead end. We're going to bring it to there, and then of course have just a few little flicks that come out into the Corn Red to kind of blend it in there. But realistically, whenever you're doing these layers, you want always to do half of what the previous layer was if you're building up that color. So our Corn Red ended about there-ish. We're going to bring this to about here. So let's go ahead and jump into Evil Sun's Scarlet. And with the Evil Sunz Scarlet, you can see that that builds upon the corn red to make it more red, but also that purplish that we've pushed back into the blue kind of helps us with that gradient. And yeah, so once in a while you flick a little bit further outward here in some random directions. I'll talk about that later, like I said, and we get that cool color transition. Now the thing that makes it pop is the last ingredient here, and that is the Kindle Flame dry paint. Dry paints are a little bit different than normal paints. They kind of are spongy almost. You just drag a whole bunch on your brush, dry brush like normal. And for this one, we're going to be very, very minimal with it. It's just going to basically be this front part of where the teeth is, the gums really, and then maybe just a smidge on where the maw, the top jaw meets the bottom jaw, and really be delicate with it. I might go very, very lightly up to this top area, but really not trying, again, half with every highlighting layer is kind of the rule here. So really we have about this much room to work with on the front of the model. I'll try to get that right in the camera, where we can do this and be sparing, because this is one of those things where less turns into more. So let's dive into that. And there we are with the Kindle Flame complete. Nice thing about Kindle Flame is it kind of takes on some of the properties of whatever layers beneath it, so it really popped out with some of that red. So that is my transition on the Herdstone. It's how I project warmth. As you can see, it's kind of a similar thing. The Herdstone has a much smaller surface area, has a lot more blue to the red, so that's why it looks a little bit different. But yeah, fundamentally, that is exactly what I did. Now, of course, I would recommend doing this first and then going on and painting on other stuff. So for example, I'm going to cut to the finished product, which is basically, I'm just going to paint the teeth actual bone colors just for the sake of showing you what it looks like when it's a finished product. Because when you look at this now, it's easy to say like, oh, I went a little too hard with the Kindle Flame because it's a little too bright in the front. But that's because part of it's on the teeth it's not going to be like that as a final product. So let me go ahead and finish this up, and I'll show you what the final results look like. Okay, and here we have the completed project. You can see that the color on the teeth really helped kind of, I don't know, add some kind of pop to the front and break up all the colors and make it so that the Kindle Flame wasn't nearly as intense as it might have looked originally. Now, when you're doing this, a few things I wanted to mention. When you're looking at this model, I chose this one specifically for this tutorial because it has a huge surface area, and so I can really take time and space to show you what each transition looks like. What I will say, however, is that less is more with this. So if we go back to that Herdstone that started it all, you'll see that realistically, I didn't do anything really on the base. And then for the actual Herdstone itself, from the base of the actual Herdstone to about a third of the way up, that's where all the Corn Red, the Wild Rider Red, and the Kindle Flame actually is. It's very minimal on this model, and that's because it's such a powerful effect that it draws your eyes there. So it draws your eyes to the fire in the bottom, and that's what I wanted to do. Something like this, if your entire army was painted in this way with nearly half the model being Corn Red and a big portion of it being Kindle Flame, it's easy to have like visual overload. And so we want to kind of keep that minimal. Again, it's one of those effects that less is more. But it does make a great base, so everything you paint on top of it really pops, like the bone here, the wood and metal and all the stuff at the bottom of the Herdstone. Now the next thing I want to touch, and this is regardless of what colors you use, just doing the dry brushing transition, there's a few things to touch. One of which is, as I said before, whenever you're doing a highlight to a color, you always want to have the next highlight, meaning the step brighter, be half as far in. So for example, we went about this far with the Corn Red. Okay, it's like right up in here, a little bit in there, so we'll just call it even right in the middle there. About half the model's Corn Red. When I did the Wild Rider Red, or Evil Sunz Scarlet, whatever color I used, I can't remember right now. What I did was I actually went to only about here. So I kind of halved the distance and with that highlight, so it gets a little bit more intense. And of course, you brush off a little bit, and I'll talk about why in a second. And then for the Kindle Flame, I went half of that. And so this is how you build up those highlights into a transition. When I talked about before about less is more and doing it in a smaller area, it looks more smooth on the Herdstone because it's a smaller area, but this was a great model with all the texture to show you what that looks like on something a little bit easier to see. So I always recommend whenever you're doing highlights, you always go half the distance of the previous layer. And so corn red to the brighter red to the Kindle Flame, and just kind of keep pushing it towards the front. Whatever's brightest, do that last. And the last note, no matter what colors you're using, no matter what colors you're transitioning to and from, what's really important is when we marked out where we're going to end with the corn red, the brighter red, and the Kindle Flame, I told you we're going to go to about here, and then if you watch me painting, you'll see me come to that line, and every once in a while I'll go a little bit beyond it. In fact, if we follow where the corn red actually ended on the model, you can look and see it starts here, right? There's blue underneath the Fenrisian blue, whatever. It comes up to here, and then it goes back inward, and then it comes outward, and then inward, so there's blue right here, and then back out, and it kind of zigzags across the model. The reason I do that is very simple. If we were to end that layer of corn red specifically at that line and did not cross it, and they did the same thing for the next highlight and the one after that, it would almost look striped. And the stripes would be going at an escalating color, but they wouldn't look very blended. And so the reason you zigzag is because when you start doing that, you're kind of melding the colors together here and there. So for example, along this section here, there's some Fenrisian blue or whatever, and then mixed with the corn red. So that's why it's kind of building that transition. And it adds a lot visually when you see the colors zigzag and morph around and just kind of play with each other. And that really was what it is. So for example, on this side, you can see that the red goes way further in the center, which what's on the tabletop and moving around, it just has a lot of different, it looks like it's in motion, looks like it's blurring, and there's no order to it. You know what I mean? And really breaks it up quite a bit. So it is an incredibly fun technique to do. It's very simple, requires very few paints, and anything that you do over this, like I said before, the bone and all the stuff on the Hearthstone really stands out. So if you liked this tutorial, go ahead and let me know. I can always do more, and I want to improve. This is my first kind of paint tutorial I've ever done. And if you know of any of the effects that I have painted on my models you'd like to see, go ahead and let me know. So friends, that completes our paint tutorial on how to build up the cool transition from reds to blues and things like that that you saw on my Hearthstone, and now, of course, on my Gnashing Maw Endless Spell. Thank you all so much for watching. Look forward to seeing you in my next video.